I hope that somebody will call us and give us any information about anything.
The boy you see is 15-year-old Joey Martin. Joey was a popular kid at school and a rising star in track, but on March 25, 1996, everything changed. That day, in the rural town of Congen, New York, a heavily wooded area 2 hours north of Manhattan, it was pouring rain as usual. The local school bus stopped on Sampsonville Road. Joey Martin rode this bus every morning, but that day, he never got on. Joey simply vanished. We have absolutely no idea where Joe is or what may or may not have happened to him, so anybody that knows anything, we'd really appreciate them supplying us with whatever information they might have. Joey disappeared, and the only person who could shed any light on it was his older brother Bill. According to Bill, their last conversation was around 10:30 p.m., when Joey mentioned meeting up with his friends Daniel and Alex. The boys were going to watch a comet that was supposed to streak across the northern sky that night. The next morning, Bill realized that Joey hadn't slept in his bed, but he expected to see him on the school bus with his inseparable friends. Alex was the first to step onto the bus. Bill immediately asked him where Joey was, and Alex replied that Joey never showed up. The previous night, he and Danny had waited for him for over an hour, had a couple of beers, and then called it a night. When Joey's mom, Kathleen, found out he wasn't at school, she started calling other parents, but no one had seen him or heard anything. Terrified for her missing son, Kathleen called the state troopers. The initial theory was that the 15-year-old boy had simply run away. When we interviewed Joey's parents, we had learned that he had snuck out before and had stayed out late or stayed out overnight. So, it didn't really raise a level of seriousness at the time because he had done this before, said Detective Daniel Beenan of the New York State Police, who was assigned to the case. The first person he questioned was Joey's brother, Bill, since he was the last one to see him. Bill shared details of their conversation that night and Joey's plans to meet his friends. His story was confirmed by Joey's two best friends, Alex Barsky and Daniel Malik. The boys had been close since before kindergarten, always together. Daniel and Joey probably met when they were 4 or 5 years old, just before kindergarten, I would say. And Joe was a little guy, and, Daniel was a little bigger, and a lot of times he would, protect Joe, a friend explained. They had even built a fort in the woods, which is where they planned to watch the comet. Both Alex and Daniel gave the same story, that they were supposed to meet on the corner of Schwab Turnpike, and Joey never showed up. So, they proceeded to go to their clubhouse and watch the comet on their own without Joey. Witnesses confirmed the boys' story, saying they saw them on the road that Monday evening before they headed into the woods. Detectives focused their attention on the area between the Martin family home and the boys' meeting point on Schwab Turnpike, about half a mile of wooded roadway. They meticulously searched every path, as Detective Beenan knew Joey was late to meet his friends because his mother had gone to bed later than usual. He speculated that Joey might have tried to make up for lost time, perhaps cutting through the woods, running, or even hitchhiking. While scouring the area, investigators discovered shattered glass from a car headlight. Since Sampsonville Road wasn't lit by streetlights, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Joey had been hit by a car and the driver attempted to cover up the incident. Upon further examination, hair fibers were found on the glass, which were immediately sent to the forensics lab for analysis. The results came back quickly. The hair on the glass wasn't human, but raccoon. The search expanded well beyond the area between the Martin home and Schwab Turnpike. Joey's family, friends, and even the city's fire department combed through the forest but found no clues. Detective Beenan then decided to dig into Joey's family history. He discovered that Joey's father had died in a roofing accident 7 years earlier, and his mother, Kathleen, had since remarried a family friend named Lance. The introduction of Lance into their lives had been challenging for the children, who felt he was taking their mother away from them, with Joey being the most critical of him. When we first got together, Joe was the one that told Lance, you better not ever hurt my mom, which, is an honorable thing for him to do, even though he was just a little boy. Experienced detectives know that some tension between a teenager and a stepfather is normal, but on the night Joey disappeared, Lance was not at home. This raised suspicions, making him a primary suspect in the case. When Detective Beenan questioned Lance, his agitation and defensiveness only fueled suspicion. Furthermore, Lance's alibi was shaky. He claimed to have been in Manhattan for work, commuting every Monday morning and returning Thursday evening. However, on the day Joey disappeared, Lance returned on Tuesday afternoon instead of his usual Thursday. Detectives began to suspect that Lance might have returned earlier, possibly the night before Joey disappeared. This theory suggested that Lance could have done something to Joey and then come home on Tuesday afternoon to avoid being noticed in the city during the night. Kathleen, Joey's mother, found it hard to believe that her new husband could be involved in such a crime, but the police told her, "It's always the mother, it's always the father, and it's always the stepfather." Lance couldn't provide anything substantial to support his alibi, only receipts from Walmart dated Tuesday morning at 9:05 a.m. The drive from the Martin family home to Manhattan took just 2 hours, so theoretically, he could have made multiple round trips in one night. Lance had no solid alibi. However, new evidence emerged that shifted the course of the investigation. It was discovered that Lance had made a phone call from his New York apartment around the time Joey disappeared, between 10:30 and 11 p.m. This was the exact time frame between Joey's last conversation with his brother and the planned meetup with his friends. Since Lance was 2 hours away, it was physically impossible for him to be involved in Joey's disappearance. It turned out Lance was so distressed by Joey's disappearance and the subsequent accusations that he simply forgot making the call. Nobody that knew us closely, would think that I was capable of doing something like that. They knew how much I cared about the kids, so the people that knew me and knew my relationship to our family, knew that was ridiculous. After confirming Lance's alibi, detectives had to broaden their list of suspects. They reviewed their database for individuals with criminal records who might have targeted teenage boys. They found a person living nearby with a questionable past, but no evidence linked him to Joey's case. 11 days after Joey's disappearance, Detective Beenan revisited the wooded area near the boys' home, focusing on the makeshift fort built by Joey and his friends. There, he found several beer bottles but no evidence suggesting that Joey's friends Alex and Daniel had lied. However, the presence of the beer bottles raised concerns. How had these underage boys come to be in possession of alcohol? In the U.S., there are strict regulations on alcohol sales. The new lead brought Beenan to a new suspect. He learned that Joey and his friends sometimes got beer from an 18-year-old neighbor named Casey. However, when the police attempted to question Casey, they ran into a problem. Casey, known for his involvement with illegal substances and a long criminal record, had also gone missing. Police found out that Casey had stolen a cargo van and left town shortly after Joey disappeared. Detectives considered two possible scenarios. The first was that Joey had willingly gone on a trip with Casey, but Kathleen, Joey's mother, quickly dismissed this theory. He left his favorite jacket, his wallet with money in it. He had over $30. To a 15-year-old kid, $30 is a lot of money. He always worked for him, so I knew he would not leave those things behind. The second, more disturbing scenario was that Joey had been taken against his will. A few days later, the stolen van was spotted. A witness reported to the state police that he had seen the van about 22 miles north of Kate Hansen in Kingston, New York. This person went into the gas station to fill it up and saw a young blonde-haired boy in the truck with him. Law enforcement quickly dispatched patrols to the area. By the time they arrived, local police had already located and detained the van, arresting Casey. Joey was not with him, and Casey denied that Joey had ever been in the van. Detective Beenan ordered a forensic analysis of the hair found in the van to determine if it belonged to Joey. Unfortunately, the results came back negative, and the investigation hit another dead end. I went to bed every night thinking of him, and I woke up every morning thinking of him, sometimes not sleeping much, just wondering. Where he was and what was happening to him remained a mystery. 6 weeks had passed since Joey's disappearance, and the case seemed to be at a standstill. The investigation was expanded, and detectives began questioning students from other schools. As an athlete, Joey had interacted with many people at various competitions throughout the year. This led to a new lead. A witness claimed to have overheard two teenagers at a party bragging about getting revenge on Joey Martin for allegedly selling them poor-quality illegal substances. The witness provided such a detailed description of the conversation that Detective Bien felt it was worth investigating. According to the witness, The teenagers had taken Joey into the woods, stripped him, and tied him to a tree. Joey had begged them to take the money instead, but they told him it was too late. They then shot him in the knees and left him in the forest. Law enforcement once again scoured the wooded area, but they found no sign of a body tied to a tree. It turned out to be nothing more than a fabrication. After several months, Joey's family, feeling desperate, did everything they could to keep their son's case in the spotlight. Lance and Kathleen knew someone must have known something about Joey's disappearance, so they turned to the media. We have absolutely no idea where Joey is or what may or may not have happened to him, so anybody that knows anything, we really appreciate them supplying us with whatever information they might have. I hope that somebody will call us and give us any information about anything. They appealed. Their appeals captured the headlines, and with Joey's photo and details prominently displayed in missing persons reports, his case finally received nationwide attention. Investigators were overwhelmed with calls, which became a problem as each tip had to be thoroughly investigated. One such lead even took them to Canada, but it turned out to be fruitless. On the anniversary of Joey's disappearance, his family organized a vigil to keep the story in the public eye. The event drew a large crowd, including around 60 to 70 of Joey's classmates, all eager to learn what had happened to him. The outpouring of sympathy and support from the community helped Lance and Kathleen feel less alone in their grief. Despite their efforts, no new leads surfaced, and after a year, the case seemed to stall, leaving the mystery of Joey's disappearance unresolved until August 19, 1997. That morning, 62-year-old George Allison left his home and found himself face-to-face with an armed criminal by his car. The young offender shot the elderly man twice before stealing his vehicle, a shocking event for the quiet town of Congan. With no witnesses, the only evidence the police had were 2.306 caliber shell casings. 2 days later, a New York State trooper spotted the stolen car. The suspect was arrested, and the gun found on him matched the caliber of the shell casings. The shooter turned out to be 17-year-old Daniel Malik, a friend of the missing Joey Martin. Daniel was once again in the interrogation chair, this time for the George Allison case. He admitted to shooting the innocent man but claimed he only needed the car and couldn't explain why he shot George. Given Daniel's violent actions, investigators wondered if he had been involved in Joey's disappearance. At that point, investigators realized that Daniel might be the key to solving Joey Martin's case. However, Daniel stuck to his previous statements, insisting that Joey had not come and that he had nothing to say about his missing friend. Despite intensive questioning, Daniel provided no new information about the case from 15 months prior. The detectives decided there was no reason to doubt him. The situation was different in the small town of Congan, where rumors began to spread about an obvious connection between Daniel and his missing best friend. Local news reporters even managed to get a reaction from Joey's mother. "Do I think Dan Malik killed my son? No, I do not. As far as him maybe knowing something about Joe getting a ride or going to do something before he met them, he might know something about that," she said. Despite the speculation, Daniel remained silent, and public discussion eventually faded. He was found guilty of George Allison's murder and sentenced to a term of 20 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Kathleen, Joey's mother, had been approached multiple times by police with the suggestion of declaring her son legally deceased. She saw this as an admission that her son was gone, something she wasn't ready to accept, as she never gave up hope. Joey's photo had been digitally aged several times to reflect what he might look like as he got older. The family faced the harsh reality that in the U.S., cases like this remain open until the perpetrator is found. Over the years, they dealt with numerous changes in investigators, each requiring them to retell their story and relive their grief. Every new detective would promise, "I'm assigned to your son's case, and I'll do everything I can." Despite this, Lance and Kathleen refused to give up. They continued to wait for their Joey. In November 2007, Detective Peter Sigliano, who had recently been promoted, received a box of cold cases, including the 1996 Joey Martin case. Determined to make progress, Sigliano retraced Joey's route to the meeting spot on Schwab Turnpike the night he vanished, and also visited the location of the fort that Joey and his friends had built. To his surprise, after 12 years, the fort was still standing. Sigliano went through the original witness statements, hoping to find any overlooked details. He reviewed the accounts from Joey's brother, Bill Martin, as well as from Joey's friends, Alex Barsky and Daniel Malik. The friends had stated that they waited by Schwab Turnpike until about 11 p.m. But Joey never showed up. All their stories matched perfectly, but when Peter Sigliano read Alex Barsky's statement, one detail stood out. Alex had said, "I went home and immediately went to sleep." The word immediately caught the young detective's attention. He said, "I went home and I immediately went to bed." When I was reading that deposition and I saw he put the word immediately, it was somewhat alarming to me because the normal person wouldn't say, "I went home and immediately went to bed." It would just be, "I went home and went to bed." A similarly strange phrasing appeared in Daniel's statement, where he said, "We all walked." Zeno noted that if it had been just Daniel and Alex, he would have said, "Alex and I," or "I and Alex," or just "we." The phrase, "we all," seemed more suited to a group larger than two people. At that moment, the detective wasn't sure if these were merely inconsistencies in 12-year-old statements or if they indicated new evidence. Since Daniel Malik was serving a prison sentence, Sigliano decided to re-interview Alex Barsky. He tracked him down in Brooklyn and brought him to the police station for further questioning. At the beginning of their conversation, Peter placed a photo of Joe Martin in front of Alex Barsky, carefully watching for his reaction. After all these years, it was exactly what Peter had hoped for. Peter could almost see the lump in Alex's throat. After about 15 seconds of silence, Alex finally asked, "They're still looking for him, right?" Sigliano replied, "No, Alex, he's dead." The reaction to those words was even more revealing. Alex's face quickly flushed red, but he stubbornly stuck to the same story he had told 12 years earlier. The detective then suggested that Alex take a polygraph test, explaining it could clear everything up, and if Alex was telling the truth, the police would never bother him again. Alex agreed. Later, the polygraph examiner informed Sigliano that Alex Barsky had failed the test. As their conversation continued, and each time Peter sensed that a red-faced, nervous Alex was on the verge of confessing, Alex would ask to be excused to the bathroom. Sigliano knew he couldn't push too hard, knowing his only suspect wasn't under arrest and could end the conversation at any moment. Peter shifted his approach, appealing to Alex's emotions. He spoke about Joey's family, the years of uncertainty, and how desperately they needed the truth to finally bring an end to this chapter. In the end, Peter placed his hand on Alex's shoulder and said, "Alex, you need to let this out. It's been buried inside you for too long. You've spent these 12 years looking over your shoulder, knowing this moment would come." The interview had stretched on for 13 hours when Alex finally blurted out, "What if I can't get you the body?" Sigliano, stunned, realized that Alex had just confirmed Joey was dead, and it seemed like Alex was on the verge of breaking down and revealing what had happened in those secluded woods. Still trying to avoid a full confession, Alex added, "A piece of steel hit him." Sigliano pressed for clarity, and at last, Alex dropped the careful wording and admitted that Daniel had struck Joey on the head with a steel pipe and continued hitting him over and over. Detective Peter Sigliano convinced Alex to take him to the scene and show him exactly what had happened. They drove along Sampsonville Road, retracing the route Joey had taken that night, confirming that he had indeed hitchhiked part of the way. Alex explained that Joey had arrived around 11 p.m. as planned. Joey was in a good mood, suspecting nothing as they walked through the woods. But Alex and Daniel had already been plotting their sinister plan for days. The three boys arrived at their fort and drank a few bottles of beer. At one point, Daniel asked Joey to pass him another bottle, and as Joey knelt down to grab it, Daniel hit him in the head with a steel pipe, causing Joey to lose consciousness. Not stopping there, Daniel continued to beat him several more times. Daniel then passed the pipe to Alex, who also took a few swings. Together, Barsky and Malik wrapped their friend's body in a filthy blanket, loaded him into an old wheelbarrow, and buried him under a large rock deep in the woods. The next morning, both Alex and Daniel got on the school bus and encountered Joey's brother, lying directly to his face. Naturally, Sigliano wanted to know where Joey was buried. Alex struggled to identify the exact location, so they decided to leave the bus and head to an open area. Barsky glanced to the left and spotted a rock, saying, "I think it's this one." Indeed, beneath the rock, they found an old dirty blanket, but there were no remains. Alex then explained why the remains were missing. 6 years earlier, in 2002, Barsky had visited the same location, arriving from Brooklyn in a yellow cab with a dark intention. He dug up Joey's remains and packed the bones into several garbage bags. On the way back to Brooklyn, he directed the cab driver to stop at various places. At each stop, he discarded parts of Joey's remains into different trash bins, believing he had destroyed all the evidence that could link him and Daniel to the crime. When investigators arrived at the scene, forensic experts meticulously examined the area and managed to find fragments of teeth and bones. DNA testing confirmed that these remains belonged to Joey Martin. The investigators then informed the Martin family of their findings. Kathleen was utterly devastated, as though her world had collapsed. Throughout Joey's disappearance, Alex and Daniel had stayed with the family, pretending to assist in the search. Alex cried and told Bill, "I'm so sorry." They attended memorials and all the events held in Joey's honor. Despite Alex's confession, law enforcement couldn't charge Daniel with the crime right away. Under New York law, they needed additional evidence to link Daniel Malik to the crime, and Alex's testimony alone wasn't sufficient. Detective Sigliano, however, showed remarkable resourcefulness. He tracked down an inmate who had been Daniel Malik's cellmate in the Ulster County Jail. This inmate revealed that Daniel had bragged about the crime and described in detail what he had done to Joey. The inmate agreed to testify against Daniel Malik in court. Daniel heard in court how his own cellmate's testimony was being used against him. So what was the motive, you might ask? It turns out Barsky and Malik had been planning their revenge for 2 days because Joey Martin had stolen Alex's stash of illegal substances. Alex Barsky was charged with first-degree manslaughter and sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison, as he was under 16 at the time of the crime. Daniel Malik was also found guilty and received the maximum sentence, ranging from 15 years to life imprisonment, which would begin after he served his initial term. Lance, Joey's stepfather, vowed that he and his family would attend every parole hearing to ensure Daniel never got out. In March 1996, a rare comet streaked across the night sky, but Joey Martin never got to see it.